Welcome, welcome. This is The Outsiders, Episode 9, a podcast against Western civilization. And this is take 2. I was talking last time about my personal journey going from a teenager noticing the lack of freedom in the world to continuing on that path, creating a freedom mailing list, exploring the Constitution and trying to understand it, and dealing with what selective service actually means. After that, I went to Germany. I served a mission in Germany for 2 years first. And then after that mission, I returned, finished my associate's degree, and then turned around and went back to Germany. Now, why did I want to be in Germany? Because I wanted to study music there. I had loved the country when I was there. I'd loved the people. I'd enjoyed the art, the architecture, the beauty of the place. And I wanted to go back and live there. And to do that, I wanted to study. So I tried out for a music school in Weimar, Germany. And at the same time, I started dating a woman. Well, I didn't get into the music school, unfortunately. But what happened was we got closer and closer. And then I discovered that Germany says, as an American, you can't just go to Germany and stay as long as you want. You can stay for 3 months. You can do some vacationing and visiting. But if you want to live there, you need permission from the state. So I was in a conundrum. And the conundrum is, how do I continue this relationship that I've been building, this connection with this person? And how do I stay in Europe to enjoy and continue my life like I want to? At that point, it didn't make much sense for me that the state, the beast, could have random lines drawn on a map. It would tell people where they get to be and where they don't get to be. I had to understand that because when I was on my mission, I had everything taken care of for me. They took care of the rent payments we paid from America, but they took care of the rent payments. They took care of all the paperwork to get us our permission to stay in Germany. Everything was taken care of by the church. So I didn't really have any worries except for buying food every week, and that was about it. Okay. So this new way of being, coming back and being subjected to the full power of the state without the mediator of a large corporation, all of a sudden left me on my own. Because the corporation was in league with the state to solve its problems, and if it was to help the corporation, it would help me. And really, that's what it was. The church was just a corporation as far as the state was concerned, bringing in people to spend money, which they liked. So, before I get any deeper, I want you to understand the difference between a nation and a state. A nation is a group of people who speak a similar language, have similar values, views, probably look similar. And these can be the Uyghurs in China. These can be the Kurds. They can even be virtual nations such as the Nation of Islam. They can be the German nation. And they can be the nation of the Navajo or the Cherokee nation. And the interesting thing is, modern society confuses us. It confuses us with the idea between a nation and a country. A nation is this group of people. Well, a country is an abstract line placed on a map, and often the powers that be, the UK, the US, they will draw the lines on the maps in such a way so that they go right through tribes that would otherwise be connected, and they include people in countries who are different nationalities. Not every nation has a country, as you just heard. But every country has at least one nation. And the problem is these countries, they decide that they own the area under the line that was magically drawn for no reason at all, and that they get to decide who enters, who leaves, what everyone can do inside that space, etc., with the exception of diplomats, or when you go more than a certain amount of miles in the ocean, in which case laws don't apply anymore, just maritime law. Okay. So what does this mean? This means that I was stuck between a rock and a hard place because I had no corporation vouching for me, and I wanted to continue this relationship, and I wanted to continue to stay in Germany. And the only way to do that, I'm sad to say, was to get married. So we did. And this proved to be deleterious for a lot of reasons. But imagine that, forcing someone to get married so that they can enter a country of opportunity or work in the field that they want or live in the place that they want or be free. And that's exactly what the state does. It creates the rules and laws around who can be where when. And for some reason, marriage is one of those exceptions. If you're married, you get to be more or less with that person. Now, I thought that that was how it was going to work until we were married 3 or 4 years and we decided to take a bit of a sabbatical and go to America. First of all, we bought tickets, I think, for 6 months. When we got to the airport, me and my German wife, everything's official. All the paperwork is done. We're very, very married at that point. All of a sudden, we get to the airport and they say she can't fly with this ticket. And I say, why not? And it says, because she can only stay 90 days. And so I thought, well, wait a second, we're married. Should that be a problem? Now, I was that naive back then. And also, laws have been getting steadily more strict over the past 100 years. It used to be anyone could go anywhere for any reason whatsoever. And you didn't need permission from the state. In fact, passports were more like letting someone pass through unnoticed in case there were local skirmishes. They weren't really things that said, well, you're allowed to because this country, right? A whole huge history about the invention of passports and travel and limiting travel and how that all came together to be studied at a future time. But to continue, the state has all of these. It used to be society was controlled by religion, by your group, by your morality. And as people become more mobile and as religion becomes less important, at least the religions with which most of us identify, then the state has taken over and provided all these incentives for getting married. And why? That's another talk for another time. Okay. So I get married, and because there's no other option, because I have to. And that force was a lack of freedom, taking away my freedom, which I recognized slightly at the time. It didn't feel really good to make this decision. It wasn't like I was super convinced about marriage or anything, or that I definitely wanted to do it, because that wasn't the case. But here we are. Okay. So the state gives people advantages who toe the line, including get married, and takes away advantages from people who don't, or punishes people who don't. All right. So I'm trying to live free, and I'm looking at all these different ideas in the world, and there's people who are protesting taxes. There's people who are claiming all these things about if you learn the right papers, or if you sign documents the right way, or if you send the right document to someone, then you're going to be free and you're not going to have to obey all the laws that everyone else wants to. And these things, whether they're right or not, as someone asked Ron Paul at some point, he says they have all the guns. So it doesn't matter whether they're right or not. They're happy to enforce whatever they say the law is. And that's kind of how it works. So I try. I say, well, should I have to register my car? And I'm sitting there going through a bit of a crisis. It's actually my car and the state shouldn't. And I start getting letters. And the letter says, well, if you don't pay this, there's going to be a fine. Another letter comes. If you don't pay this, the fine will get bigger. If another letter. If you don't pay this, we're going to take your car away. And I soon figure out how the state works and how the government functions. And the basic idea of it is we make a law. And if you don't follow the law, then we fine you. If you don't pay the fine and or obey after that, we imprison you. If you resist imprisonment, you will be killed. And that is the structure of Western civilization in a nutshell. That is what happened to the natives on America. That's what happened during the slave trade, black and white. That's what happened to tribes today that resist oil and gas and mineral explorations. That's what happens to anyone who resists taking of their land, building dams on their land in China or anywhere else. That's what happens. We made a law, we did something, you obey, you will be fined, you will be imprisoned, you will be killed. So there's no negotiating with the state. There's no negotiating with the government. Govern means to control, ment means mind control government. You don't get to, watch the people who are trying to negotiate with the cops and all these protests that are happening right now. They're getting black eyes and beaten and thrown in prison. And as I wrote today, what are you most afraid of when you protest? Going to jail, going to prison, or no, going to jail, going to the emergency room, or going to the morgue? And you have to think about those things because they're using weapons, including rubber bullets, things like that. First of all, it's illegal to use tear gas in times of war, and yet they use, according to the Geneva Convention, and yet they're using tear gas on citizens who are protesting. Rubber bullets can kill people, and they use those, and they don't worry about it. They have sound weapons. They have all these things. They're using the maximum amount of force that they think they can get away with without causing general rebellion. Because when general rebellion happens, then everyone sees the truth. And the truth is that the state is absolutely, I want to say inviolate, but that's the other way around. They want the state to be inviolate. The state is, what's that word? Not real, not true. It's not illegal, but it's illegitimate. That's the word. The state is illegitimate. There is the whole structure, the whole idea behind the state that's going to take care of me and gets to make the rules and the laws. Well, if you look at that in any social situation, if you read what Carl Jung thought about it, if you read what Erich Fromm wrote about it, Escape from Freedom, you will see that, or Wilhelm Reich, even better, you will see that the state is a mechanism to control people based upon their parental and familial damage. In other words, people have a good or bad experience with their parents, and then they latch on to the state or the government is the same thing. The state says, I'm going to pay your bills and make everything all right. Then we say, oh, thank you, government. I'm so happy. Where they get that money, since they don't do any constructive work, they get it from everyone else that they steal it from, or they print it. Either way, the money becomes less valuable or damage is done, right? And if the state punishes people for doing things and imprisons them and charges you money to pay for the people who are imprisoned, it hasn't solved anything. It doesn't have any magical powers, doesn't have the ability to punish, doesn't have the ability to tax. All of these things are completely made up. Countries are completely made up. You've never seen a country. You've never seen a county. Cities are physical locations where people are, right? But countries are just abstract ideas, lines drawn on maps. And based on that, we say, well, I'm an American because I live below this line. If I lived a mile higher, I'd be a Canadian. What difference does it make? Why is that so special? Who cares? Like, is there some ultimate truth that's getting presented by virtue of you living below or above a certain line? It's funny when you look in Mexico, you go from Tijuana to California or the other way, you see this beautiful, lush, green area, and then immediately it's desert, right where that line is, right where the government changes, right? So depending on how much energy the parasite of the state siphons off of the people, you will see the effects in the land. And everywhere the state goes, you see predation and destruction and devastation. You see ecological collapse. You see species being wiped out. You see people getting poorer and less happy. Although, I read a couple days ago, and I read aloud on this podcast, where they say, well, okay, we take people who didn't need any money and subsisted for generations on by subsistence farming, and we take away their land so they can't feed themselves, and then we pay them $2 a day to work in making factories, making iPhones, and all of a sudden we've benefited the economy and saved them from poverty. That's how the state looks at these things. That's how the state judges these things. And that's the rhetoric that we're given. And I realize I'm trying to talk to fish in water, trying them help to see the water they're in and to show them something better outside the water. So it's hard to see that. It's hard to figure that out. But that's really what's happening. And a number of people see it and they feel the frustration of that and they don't know what to do about it. They don't know how to change it. And I didn't either. Eventually, I was studying all of these ideas about freedom, and if you just know the right terms, and this is how taxes were set up, and it's the wrong words, and it's anyway. Well, what you find out is it doesn't matter what you think. You can, if you're in the way of the machine, you're crushed just the same. Just like the Native Americans were, just like the native tribes are today, just like the Chinese who are losing their homes and forced to go make your sneakers for 50 cents an hour. The same thing is happening, right? and it doesn't matter what's just or right. But yet all the power is with us. And if we choose to have the power, then we can change things. But one person at a time, well, he's likely to get a shot in the forehead with a 30-06. That's what seems to be the modus operandi for people like MLK or John Lennon or whatever, right? Okay, so I'm trying to find this freedom, and I see that if I disobey the smallest thing, if I don't pay my right taxes or, you know, register my car or whatever, they're going to take it away. Eventually they're going to imprison me. If I keep resisting, they're going to kill me. And then I realize I am in a occupation that every country, every state, every government in the world is not having power by consent of the governed, because again, they can't delegate powers they don't have. Every state, every government in the world is a despotic dictatorship, and that's just how it is. And that kind of sucks to know and to see. But now once I realize this is the mafia, this is a foreign country, an invasion that's happening. This is not a simple, beautiful, nice journey of sharing and connection and structure for society. Well, then you start thinking about things completely differently, and you start understanding things completely differently. So I'm still sending out my quotes. I'm still thinking about, okay, what's wrong here exactly? But I'm following the church principles, and the church teaches the Constitution is sacred. Therefore, we need to honor the Constitution and try and restore it. Well, we see how well that's going. And the cracks are forming in my ideas of spirituality at the same time. And so then I'm considering everything around marriage at the same time, because what was promised to me doesn't feel like it's being delivered on so many levels, right? The promises of my family or the government or whatever doesn't feel like it's coming in for me like they promised. So I need to think about what I'm going to do now and what the actual truth is. After studying all these things, all I know is my freedom is being taken away. I live in some sort of despotic dictatorship, whether it's labeled that way or not. My energy and my time is very strongly forced into specific paths, and I can't really do what I want. None of this makes me happy. I don't like any of this, but I don't know what to do about it. And so we will continue from there, I believe, unless I have another piece of note that I want to talk about. No, that's enough for now. And I'm going to, I think, come up with a path, a course, something to support people who are going through a similar journey where the worldview is changing, where the world is changing, and how to deal with destruction as it comes upon us, whether it's psychological transformation, destruction, and devastation, or things going on outside us, because things are changing a lot. All right, thank you for listening. All my love.